All right, Corey, what's up, man?
Oh, just in between racing between work, raising three young kids, trying to make people laugh, maintain my sanity and health, not overeat too much. But as we were saying, I just ate a rack of ribs last night. I'm feeling good. It's digesting now. It's finally working through, and I'm ready to rock and rumble here.
Yeah, you and I were just going back and forth about like I did too. I ate a ton yesterday, and Mondays are my fasting day, so I do at least a 24, if not a 36-hour fast. Just and Mondays is a perfect day for me because I just do podcasts just back to back to back, so I'm super busy. And but I had as you mentioned, I had Thomas DeLauer on not too long ago, which
Yeah.
and he made a comment that actually was a little fiery for my audience, and they were like, he basically, his comment was, if you can't go more than 20 hours eating without eating, you got a problem. It's like,
Well,
because the human body was designed to go for some periods of food, some periods without food, and you know 20 hours is not all that much. And you would have thought like we we put a comment out there that it's illegalized like dog fighting or something, because like guys like just came rushing in and be like, no man, you're starving yourself. And like and then you got Thomas, who's like literally like the picture of like physical health, like saying stuff like that. But yeah.
it's I think you do a podcast for fathers. I think the quickest way to irritate an audience is to talk about how to raise their kids, what to do with their
Oh
money,
yeah.
or how to eat, engage in the diet wars. And
Yeah.
I'm a pharmacist in my day job, and I do diabetes and obesity management, and it's just a tiptoe battle of making sure you're not offending someone's sensibilities. Uh, but
Right.
if but I'd like to offend your audience right away and just say I second everything Thomas said there. You should be able to go 20 hours, and I will up at one. I will say you should be able to go 21 hours. But
Oh yeah.
so take that, audience, rip me to shreds, please.
I'll tell you, I've done a few, not many, but a few 72-hour fasts.
Mhm.
And those are those are hard. Those are definitely hard. I do a 48-hour I would say pretty regularly.
Mhm.
But like the 72s are like sort of like next level. And then I have a couple guys that work for me, and one of them does like every 3 months he'll do 120 for, so
Mhm.
he'll go 5 straight days. I've never done anything close to that. I'm like, man, 5 days, that's a lot. I had one guy, I kid you not, he did 10 days. I was like, 10 days. I'm like, dude, like that's like, I don't know what happens to the body after that, but like it's got, I don't know. I don't know.
I can't advise that. I feel like that 20 to 24 hours is a pretty safe, good window. Say, unless you're on a number of medicines, which I mean, as a pharmacist, I don't want to bore you with the specifics of there, but yeah, as a dad, I think the 20-hour fast is like a secret weapon
Yeah.
of just being able to go without or play with your kids, or if you're traveling or whatever. It's a fun little muscle to flex, and I would call it, hacks are a word I guess I don't love, but I'm going to use it. It's a great dad hack. If you can go without eating for a long time and maintain your ability to not just get irritable, it's a
Yeah.
superpower.
Well, with raising kids too, it's like, I don't know. It's like the level of like snackage that our kids are like, I don't know, thinking about, dreaming about, or just need, or they're bored or whatever. It's like it's almost like, oh, we're gonna go do that thing, but I'm sure they have something to eat there. Well, we maybe before we go there, we should eat something, and
Mhm.
then while we're there, maybe we should think about get something to eat after we leave that place. Like it's all it's so much
Like
about food.
70% of my wife and I's conversations when we leave the house is like, what snacks are packed? Have they eaten? And we're big bringers of our own food,
Yeah.
just because I don't trust what's out there when wherever you're going. And so, yeah, we know our kids. Like, we have one that would just get super hangry when he was in like the 3 to 4 age range,
Hmm.
and we're like, "What's wrong? What are we doing wrong?" Oh, he's hungry. He would eat like a bite of a banana and be like nice again. So
Okay.
the picture of those Snickers commercials when you get grumpy and they turn into like whatever mean celebrity it is. So, but that's like that was like parenting 101 that we learned was when the kid's upset, start with some
Start
food.
with food.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody told me start with, are they thirsty, hungry, or tired?
Hmm.
If those three, if you don't check one of those boxes, chances are it's one of those three. And if not, then maybe dig a little deeper. It might be something else.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
we go beyond and say, are they overstimulated or are they understimulated too?
Yeah.
That's usually when we push them too much and go to some big loud event. It's like, oh, there's just too much going on for them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So your background is crazy fascinating to me. So like, first of all, I love comedy.
mhm.
Um, I've never done stand-up comedy. I've never done improv or anything like that, but I've always like had like this interest of like, what would that be like if I did that? Like I don't know what the secret to you guys in improv comedy is, but I've seen a few improv shows and we used to be ridiculous fans of Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Mhm.
And I'm like, how in the world do these guys remember this? Like there was one show I went to, and again, like I'm guessing there's got to be a secret to this, or you guys are just so crazy smart, next level. Like it's I don't know what it is, but like we went to an improv thing and this was in Dallas and there was like I don't know like 8 or 9 different improv comedians and they were all up there on stage and they were literally just gathering ideas from the audience of what they could talk about. And not only did they have to do their improv in forward fashion like but they also had to do it in reverse, and
Mhm.
every time they would go back and forth they would add another element from the audience and then they would add that in and go back and forth and reverse and forward, and I'm like, how in God's name do these people keep all of this straight? It just fascinates me.
Well, I will say this: you are an improviser. Like every time you're interviewing a guest, like I will disclose to the audience, we have 0 scripts right now. We're not reading from a script. So
Right.
what you're doing with every guest you talk to is improvisation. And I would say this, I mean, it's a poorly kept secret, but improv is all about living in the moment, listening and responding. And honestly, it's a muscle that can be taught. Like I'm a pharmacist by trade. Pharmacists are not known for our sense of humor. Um, and when I started my pharmacy career, I had a lot of issues with dealing with like the unknown of healthcare, having patients ask weird things, doctors ask weird things. And I took an improv class and ended up performing, teaching, coaching, all of it. But it really trained my brain to live in the moment, respond, and build that adaptability muscle. But if you want to learn the secret, it's like 2 words. It's yes and. You agree to whatever is said and you build together, and then you live in the moment and respond honestly. And you could do improv.
It's unreal, man. Like, how did you know in particular, like that you kind of had this funny bone, like about you, like that you could, I mean, like, I think some people are kind of curious about it, but to actually
Mhm.
step forward and be like, I'm going to try this. Like, what was it? What happened?
I mean, I grew up. My parents. I have great parents, but they did put a TV in my room from the age of 6. So I was watching The Simpsons from like 6 or 7, and their advice to me was just like do the opposite of what Bart does, and it turned out pretty good for me.
No
So I was
way.
watching comedy from a young age, and just at school every Monday morning, back when you had to like watch a show together as a country, you'd get together and you'd talk about what happened, and so we would just quote that, and then I get into SNL and Kids in the Hall and all these other comedy shows, and just had a love for learning it and laughing. And then I got to college and they had an improv comedy group at the University of South Carolina, which I went and saw, first week of freshman year. I was like, my mind was blown. This is amazing. So naturally, I ignored that itch and focused on my studies for 6 years. And then when I finished my pharmacy schooling and residency, my now wife had to figure out what to give me for my birthday, and I said, I'd love to take an improv class. It was just something I'd always wanted to do. I watched Whose Line Is It Anyway, and it
Yeah.
was quite honestly in a world of healthcare, which can be really depressing and sad and stressful. It was a beautiful place to go, have fun, and honestly just be an adult that plays.
I love that, man. What do they teach you? Like I've heard a lot of people talk about improv classes. Like, what do they teach you there?
They teach you rules, if you can believe it. So improv is a lot like a sport. And I'll explain it in the fact that like I'll go to an improv rehearsal. My parents are confused because they're like, Corey, it's all made up. What could you possibly be practicing? But much like a sport, there's certain rules and constraints you try to live in. And every improv scene, like every game that you watch, is going to be different within whatever's played. And so you're learning the skills and practicing listening. You're going to do warm-ups and games that help you remember things like that the group you saw that had 9 people trying to go backwards and forward and adding elements. Like there's all of these different skills you can add. You can work on accents. You can work on what's called object work. Like if you're on a phone, how to correctly hold a phone. And a lot of it is just it's a muscle of learning these different, and there's different formats you can learn as well. And then it's just
Really?
getting the reps.
I would have never have thought that like improv has rules.
Yeah, like the
Like
number one
that's
rule is yes and. We agree and we build together. So like for instance, if we were doing a scene and you said we're on the moon, and I was like, no, we're not in the moon, we're in a bounce house. Well, everything in that scene has ground to a halt. I've negated your reality, and then now you're going to have to justify why you thought we were on the moon. But if you say we're on the moon, and I say we only have 30 seconds of oxygen left, like we've immediately agreed to the premise and we've raised the stakes. and that's all that you're doing in a good improv scene. And I've been in plenty of bad ones, but that's when it goes well. It's just an agreement and building together.
So can we try this?
Of course. Do you think I wasn't gonna try to
I'm
get you to do
dying.
some improv?
I'm
Come
dying.
on. All
Like,
right.
okay, so okay, like, okay, give me some rules. I'll try to follow 'em. And
Okay.
guys, by the way, this Corey, was this planned?
This was not planned. We
This
did
is not
not. Well,
planned.
I had a plan to put you on the spot here,
You
but this
did?
was not discussed. Yeah. Come on, man.
All right.
You
All
can't
right,
bring
cool.
you can't come up here and say I'm going to bring improv guy on and then say I've always loved improv. I've always admired it, and not I'm not going to make you do it. But I mean I can't make you do anything. We're here recording virtually, so I want to get you a little warmed up for this. All right, I want to get
Okay.
your brain in the right space. So we're going to play a little game called Five Things. We'll play a little game, and then we'll play one other improv game where we're doing a kind of a scene together. But this
Okay.
first one, it's called Five Things. Real simple. All I'm going to do is give you like a premise, and you're going to give me the five things that come to mind as quick as possible. And one of the rules of improv, the beautiful thing is there's no wrong answers. All right, this is
Okay.
look beyond your own like confines of reality. All right.
Okay. Okay.
So I want you to tell me five things you say to someone who cuts in front of you at the grocery store checkout line as quick as you can.
In the grocery store?
Yeah, you're checking out you got your little cart filled with your healthy items and some maybe whatever your giant sundae of food. Someone cuts in front of you. Five things you say to them. It could be anything you want, real or not. Just the five things as quick as you can.
Oh shit. Okay, so like this is if somebody does it, right?
Stop thinking and just give me.
Okay.
Imagine someone has cut in front of you.
What the hell?
One,
Okay, yeah, what first one's what the hell? Be like, dude, did you not see me here?
two,
Okay. I know you have two things, but that gives you no right to just cut in front of me.
three,
I have four kids that I left in the car hungry and it's 87 degrees outside.
four. Uh-oh.
I'm just kidding. Um, um, now I'm gonna be late picking up my one other kid from practice.
Five. These are five smiley, passive aggressive, and disturbing things. All right, great. Good work. You did
Okay.
it. So, like, with the goal there is to try to get out of your like judgment head, because a lot of what improvisation is like you think like there's this idea of like follow your foot, follow your instinct. Like you're in the moment, you're trying to get whatever's going on in the scene out. With five things, the goal is to get you to stop thinking. Because I don't know if you did this, but when I told you the category, I don't know if you started trying to like think like get five things chambered in your head. A lot of people try
I
to do that and
did.
they get to like
Totally.
three and they're out. So you did a good job there. And then, yeah, you let the reality be whatever it was. Like, I know you wouldn't leave your four kids in the car and they're old enough that they could like open the door. So it's like, we're good. So, but you get to do it back to me now. So you can give me like five things. It could be like five things you would take somewhere, five things you would say, and I will give those right back to you.
Okay.
All right.
Five things that you're gonna say to your wife on a date night.
Oh my gosh, the kids are at home. Hooray. One. You can get whatever you want off the value menu. Uh, we let your mom watch the kids. It's worth it. We need to go farther away next time. And this reminds me of our first date. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you
So
go.
we would go out to a nice dinner, and that would remind us of our first date. So yeah, we're just here getting stuff out. We did 10, and honestly, when we do it at improv theater, we do 10 things, but I'm warming you up here. So
Right.
we're warmed up, we're feeling good. So we're gonna do an improv game right now, and it's
Okay.
called One Word Story, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So
Okay.
I'm gonna give you the title of a story that's never been told before. Ooh. And then you and I are going to go back and forth one word at a time, telling a coherent story. All right. It's very, listen, here's the deal, right? This is not a comedy podcast. This is a
Right.
fatherhood podcast. So
Right.
the goal here is a coherent story. No pressure to be funny. All right.
Yeah.
Your audience isn't expecting high comedy from you, although you can be very funny. And so the title of our story, we'll call it The Happy Puppy. All right. So this is The Happy Puppy. You're going to start with one word, and we're just going to go like boom, 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 back and forth,
Okay.
telling the story that the happy puppy.
All right. Got it. So I start.
You start, yeah.
Okay. Once.
Upon
A.
time,
A.
cat,
Met.
a
Puppy.
they,
Played.
all
Day.
long,
And
then
they
found
a
giant
panda.
the
Panda
was
angry.
at
The
cat
because
it
was
allergic. Hooray, we've done it. We've created a whole story there. Good work. Congratulations. We just made a coherent,
right.
winding story. Now, did that story go the way you planned?
No, it didn't. And
It
there's
didn't.
go ahead. Yeah, no.
Yeah, there was
No.
a panda in
Right.
the story. I did this on purpose. Like this is like I immediately went to cat instead of like puppy or dog,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just to see how you would react. The big thing with this kind of activity in this story is we talk about what skills we're learning. This is giving up control. So
Yeah.
how did it feel to only be able to control a single word at a time?
It was fascinating. And the reason I was laughing so hard was because so I didn't know this was like an improv thing.
Hmm.
And I took me and it was all four of my boys and then two of their friends. So there was me, six boys on a camping trip.
Hmm.
And we sat around the fire and we did this. And I don't know, I came home and I told my wife, I was like, I could try to tell you the story that the 6 of us came up with because we all went around saying one word, but it was so funny, I was laughing so hard, like, we came up with, like there was a gorilla and he had a pet anteater
Hmm.
that somehow saved the human race from, like, a complete catastrophic event, like
Yeah. Oh, it's absurd.
yeah, it was so absurd. Yeah,
Yeah, and with this, I think the thing, and we'll bring this back to being a father, right? So
yeah.
with father, this is we did not just create the Larry Hagner comedy podcast, unless
I
unless people want that spinoff, all right? But I already turned them off with my thoughts on fasting. But what we're doing here as a fathers are so much beyond our control. There's so much
yeah,
absurdity,
yeah,
and I think a lot of the at least for me in my world of my 6, 4, and 1 year old thus far, like the biggest challenges that I faced or the moments that I felt the worst is when you're trying to control things beyond your control, or
mhm.
when to use an analogy, like when the story changes quickly and you're still stuck in your previous story. And with this little, it's admittedly a silly activity. Like I won't pretend it's not. It forces you to live in the moment. It forces you to solve problems by listening versus trying to create the answers in your head. And as fathers and as husbands, because if there's a dad out there, a husband who's never tried to solve their wife's problem and wound up like in more trouble than not, you're lying. Like we've all tried to solve the problem instead of just listening. And so it seems like a simple skill like listening, but we all do it so poorly. And so these little activities, these little games are great reminders and ways to learn to listen and give up that control.
I agree, man, and, I'm guessing that doing improv, this is as we are confronted, like you and I are doing this, right? And let's just say, quote unquote, the story isn't going in the direction that I wanted it to go or that I thought it was going to go, right?
Mhm.
So, like, I think we pick two different types of responses, right? We either, like you and I were like laughing at like
Mhm.
how the story that we really weren't controlling was unfolding,
Mhm.
or we could get upset and resist it and get pissed off about it, which I find a lot of us kind of do. Like, especially if we're trying to manage 3 and 4 kids and or 5 kids or whatever, right? All the things that go on in life. And you're like, oh my gosh, like if one more thing happens or this or that happens, like I might go crazy or whatever. But you you not only do this for a part-time living, but it sounds like you live this in your within your family.
I do my best. If you talk to my wife, she will say, I mean, nobody's perfect here,
Sure.
but yeah, what's what we aim to do. And that's sort of our philosophy with our kids. And my wife she does jujitsu. So it's sort of like a verbal mental jujitsu where you try to use the momentum of whatever's happening and sort of a yes and approach to life versus trying to fight what isn't. Like we were traveling last week and my son wanted to walk up the down escalator at the airport. And I just saw like another family whose kids they're being boys and like, they're just like, stop it, sit down, stop it. And they're just like angry and escalating. And my wife and I were like, we were in Columbia, South Carolina, like a tiny little airport. Nobody's in it. Like, let him go up it. I don't care. I'm waiting for the rental car. Like, he's been on a plane for 6 hours. Like, he's been cooped up. The worst thing that happens is they say stop or no. Like, are they going to like throw this 6-year-old out of an airport and ban him for life? Like, let him go do that. And we got a 2-hour drive in front of us. And rather than create that friction and that consternation with your kid.
I love that, man. It's interesting, like how quickly we want to course correct something that, quite frankly, doesn't even at times need to be course corrected, right? Like, my 8-year-old, I can't remember. See, this is how important it was, right? My 8-year-old was doing something. It was while we were in church,
Mhm,
and he was just sort of playing like quietly and wasn't irritating people around him or anything like that. And there was a part of me that somehow became concerned, like, well, what if he's like disturbing people around us or what? And he wasn't. He was just being very quiet and just
mhm.
playing. But there was that part of me that just wanted to be like, Colton, stop. Colton, pay attention. Colton. And then I just kind of like sat back for a second. I was like, wait a second. I was like, is this hurting anybody? Is it
Yeah.
doing anything? Like, is he actually doing anything wrong? No, he's actually being pretty well behaved, and he's just chilling out, and he's making his own entertainment. And
Mhm,
which I thought was pretty interesting. Like, it was just more of a self-reflection, like how quickly I want to course correct, something that I might think that is wrong.
mhm.
But instead of just like going with the flow and being like just being okay with it.
Yeah, and a that is it's interesting, like the values that are were around growing up, and I'm blessed to have my parents and my in-laws as grandparents with our kids. And I'll promise I'll make this relate, but my parents are much more worried about all the little minutia. And so we go to their house and it's just like, careful, stop, stop, careful. And we go to my in-laws' house and they're like, we could probably use a couple of rules at their house. Like it's much more permissive. But we were on this trip together and the grandparents, both sets of grandparents were there. And my father-in-law was walking up with my boys and my mom and dad, and they were running up to the beach, like running ahead of everybody. And my parents were like, okay, slow down, stop. And I was off lugging gear or something. And my father-in-law turns to my wife, his daughter. It's like, Jesus, like walking with Cory. I was like, oh,
Oh,
that's a truth. So I'm not perfect at this, but I argue I'm undoing the programming I've had from my very lovely, well-intentioned parents.
right. What is it? Tell me about your book.
Yeah.
Because like you've created, not only a hobby that you love, probably something that feeds you as a father. And what I mean feeds you, like feeds your sanity, like maybe
Hmm.
even like I would even call like you doing improv like almost like this really cool superpower, like almost a reliable skill that when things go bad, like you can put your we perceive the world the way we perceive the world, right? So if we
Hmm.
perceive the world like something's wrong, broken, and missing, it's out of my control. I got to get control of it right away by doing a course correct, or I just don't feel easy. I feel uneasy about what's going on, right? Or my kids are irritating me.
Hmm.
You've really flexed this muscle by practice and this superpower of like, and I can view the world through the lens of improv and maybe even find the humor here and find the easiness here. But
Yeah.
um, when did this all kind of like when did this become a part of like your operating system? It's really cool.
Like the comedy became a part of my operating system. Like 2013, I took my first class, and it was probably within that first year I noticed a tangible change in my work as a pharmacist, my ability to interact with patients, and really what improv allows you to do is like, people don't know it when I'm at the grocery store or with a patient, but it just turns everything into a game of identify their want, uh, react and empathize with whatever's going on in their life, being able to adapt to, one day a patient might need a hug, day a patient might need a laugh, one day they want to talk about sports, another wants to talk about their gardening. Being able to inhabit all those different like shoes and hats to be able to connect with the patient. And this, I say patient in my day job as a pharmacist. This works as a friend, a parent, as a coworker. All of these different skills to also just again be able to live in the moment and listen better and make others feel seen, heard, and understood. When your kids feel seen, heard, and understood, they're going to listen to you. When your spouse feels seen, heard, and understood, you're going to have a better relationship. When your patients or your clients feel seen, heard, and understood, they're going to know that, like, oh, he knows what I want. And even if I cannot literally say yes to your request, I have been heard in my desire. And so it just became a part of me as I performed more, ended up teaching classes, running our comedy school at our theater here in Tucson, the Tucson Improv Movement, which I perform with less often now because I've shifted to going and working with businesses and healthcare organizations on teaching their employees these skills. And then ultimately culminated as I decided to step back from my day job, and which is that big yes and leap. Like I want to spend more time with my kids. Don't be afraid of taking that bold step. And it was as I was playing with my kids that the first joke in this book kind of came up. And from there, I just started writing down ideas and creating, said, I think there's a book here, and writing it.
And how long has the book been out for?
It's been out. So as we record this on the 24th of June, it came out on Mother's Day. So it's been about 5 or 6 weeks.
So you wrote a dad's book and you launched it on Mother's Day.
Of course. What better gift to give mom?
Exactly.
Be a
That's what
better
I was
dad.
thinking. Like, honey, I know it's your day, but it's actually my day. Just so you know.
Yeah. I honestly, I feel like a lot of mothers would welcome that ability to have that father and husband who's more present and is able to be a better dad. Yeah.
I love it, man. How long have you guys been married for?
We've been married 10 years.
Nice.
As of January of 2024. So together since 13, engaged in 12, met in 12, engaged in 13, married in 14. That's how I remember it.
So let's switch this over to some really cool, skills that we can utilize into our marriages, right?
Yeah.
How has having this lighthearted, playful attitude and persona helped you within marriage?
I would say then a lot of those moments where you want to be upset or be frustrated, we laugh at the absurdity of whatever's going on. And I'm more type A. My wife is actually more laid back, and so we've kind of melded into a more reasonable. She uses a schedule, and I use like a ability to step back and laugh at things. But I think, like you mentioned with your son Colton, like that ability to zoom out and realize this is really not that important. I think there's a level of playfulness with us. Like she did improv for a while too, so we can step into a game, or we'll do something like, I want to have steak for dinner. It's like there's a game called New Choice. It's like new choice. Oh, I want to have chicken for dinner. Ooh, new choice. Oh, I want Mexican food. Like we can just step into some of these games and then use them with our kids too to get them playing along. Um, there's a lot of empathy involved in improv, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, identifying their want, and then it's elementary stuff, but listening, which we're all so bad at, it has really trained our brains to, instead of trying to think ahead to the next thing, like you live in the moment and you really make sure that person feels heard. And I think a lot of marriages that doesn't happen as much as they'd like. And then like the last little component here as I ramble is that improv is a team sport. So a lot of people assume when I meet them, they're like, oh, I have this idea for your comedy, you can use it. And I gratefully like thank them, but improv, you work as a team and there's a lot of energy sharing. Like sometimes, like when we were doing our one word story, sometimes someone gets like the and word, someone gets the funny word, air quote, funny word. Well, improv is all about supporting each other in the service of that laugh. And marriage is clearly a team sport. Being a father's a team sport, and being willing to put that ego aside, which improv has taught me a lot of, in the service of our marriage, in the service of our kids. Like it doesn't matter about what I want; it's about what's best for the Jenks team, so to speak.
So really dumb question, but is improv classes, is it all about improv comedy or is it just about improvisation?
Really, it's going to depend on your class and your level. Like when you start, like the idea is improv comedy, and this is going to be dependent on every school that you go to, every place that teaches it. When I'm teaching it to a group of healthcare professionals, like the goal is to make it fun and lighthearted. So we're going to do the activities like we did, where we're going through and we're playing 5 things and we say ridiculous stuff that we would never actually tell someone in a grocery store line, and then the goal is to get a laugh. But what I like to integrate into when I'm speaking to healthcare professionals is that improvisation isn't always about being funny. Improv is about listening and understanding what that person in front of you needs. And that, because when I tell people I'm a comedian that does pharmacy and improv, and they say, well, boy, your patients just must love your jokes. Well, if I'm talking to a patient who tells me their spouse just died, they don't need a joke. And I think a lot of the problems comes when we just kind of go from a rote like checklist of like, I'm going to do this, this, and this. So to answer your question, most improv classes are for comedy, but I think there is a level of improvisation that we need to be able to apply in those situations where my kid is sick, they hurt their knee, my spouse is upset about something, my parents are sick. All of these different things require us to be able to adapt in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's really good. Uh, I would have never thought that improv would teach you empathy and
Yeah.
other people's needs. That's really fascinating. Can you just expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so when you go to your improv show and someone's doing a scene and they're rattling off all of these facts, like not statistics necessarily, but like all of these things about themselves within their scene, their history, what they did with their boyfriend last week, all the ways they got cheated on, assuming it's a scene about, we'll say that's what the scene was about. There's no possible way that when I start an improv scene, I could have memorized all of the things about my character or that other character. And the best improv scenes are one where you identify what like yourself as a character want and what that person across from you wants. And then everything that you're doing is filtered through that why, that want, that desire, because it allows you to live in the moment and answer what's ever happening in the scene in a way that's designed to be usually in the way of like trying to find a laugh. But when we're doing this in our real life, like that empathy of figuring out what people are feeling in that scene kind of translates well to real life as well.
Interesting. That is really fast. I would have never thought that.
Yeah.
Um, I love the fact that this, I'm guessing improv, now that you're saying all this, it's got to make you a really good listener.
Well, if you want to be a good improviser, yes, I've
Yeah.
definitely played with people who never figure out that side of it, and they're not as funny. And I can't pretend that I'm the funniest or best improviser. Clearly, I still have a day job,
Hmm.
but I would say that when I speak with my wife and we kind of discuss when she talks with her girlfriends about their spouses, their husbands, and how what's going on in their house, I have moments where I feel like I could really do a lot better, but I think on the whole, it has made me much better at listening. And the feedback, and I'll make this about healthcare for a moment, that myself and my wife have gotten from patients is I never heard that you're the best pharmacist I've ever had, which is fine. It's fair. I'm not, but I will hear you're the first person who's actually listened to me, and that is like awesome that I've done that, but also like terrifying and sad that this 75-year-old person has been going to the doctor for 50 years, 70 years, whatever, and they've never been really heard. So that to me shows that like objectively, okay, I think I'm doing something right here.
Yeah, my general care practitioner. So I have a, I have a friend of mine. He's also a client. He does, wellness and health and
Hmm.
longevity and all that. And so we trade with our stuff, and he's a great listener, right?
Hmm.
He's all about, the goals you want, and like where I'm at with my health and all that. But and my general, like, I literally just had to go to a physical for with my general practitioner, and like he just he I mean, I've been going to him for 20 years. I probably still won't stop, but like he's always he never listens.
Yeah,
Like, he just never listens.
it's
And
it,
but he's been practicing medicine for like 30 years. So
yeah, and I'll throw the empathy hat on and empathize with those general practitioners who are having to see 25, 30 patients a day. They get 7 minutes with a patient. They have untold amounts of like charting and rules and other things that are pulling at them. So like I get it, and I've been in that burnt out phase, and sometimes like I feel that same burnout too. Like when we're done recording, I'm going back to work, and there's stuff that I'm just banging my head against the wall with. But regardless of what setting you're in, like everyone can listen. Like that is a
mhm.
skill that can be taught and is just highly valuable as we know, but we don't always do.
What about like the empathy thing though? Like how has it kind of activated your skill of empathy?
Well, I think it's really being willing to see the world through the other person's eyes. Like as a pharmacist, I have a unique job where I can prescribe for others, or I have my kids who like I try to like I'll start with pharmacy and work out, but imagine that you go to see someone that you've never met before, and I'm going to give you this thing that could be a poison if you take too much of it, right? Well, that would suck. I don't want to take medicine, and I want to put myself in the shoes. Or you're 70 years old and your spouse has dementia and you're taking 25 pills a day, like which happens a lot. Like, do you think this one more pill is going to be the secret to your health? Like, it would suck. I would not want to be that person. And so, it's a balance because there's a level of personal accountability that I work in the diabetes and weight loss space that often is lacking. It can be can be frustrating, but seeing the world through their eyes, and then like as a father looking at your kids, okay, well, I remember being 5, and there's no context to anything, and I think that's been really helpful for me as we raise kids, like navigating them through school. Uh, we've got into youth sports and seeing how the other parents just have well-meaning but like no clue of what the reasonable expectation of a 5-year-old on a baseball field is. Like they don't know up for down. Like they have a glove, they have a bat, they like swinging and hitting things. Like, but to expect certain things to then get upset at them is unreasonable. And then for me and my wife, one of the biggest challenges I had when I first had the baby was our first kid was there's not a lot as much for me to do. Like this baby's breastfeeding from my wife. She's up all night. So that would really suck. So I'm going to pick up the slack and everywhere else. And every time I want to complain to my wife about something, I think, she was up all night last night and the last 6 years. So I'm going to shut my mouth and and do my part for the house.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really fascinating, like just being able to connect the dots because yeah, I'm sitting here the shows that I've seen and improv I've seen and everything you're talking about. Yeah, it's right in that skill of like having the other person feel seen and heard, right?
Hmm.
And to be empathetic and knowing where they're going and what they're doing, what's on their mind, and being able to read people really, really well.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, what about with just does it ever get annoying to your family? Like
Oh.
so, like meaning like so this is kind of like what dad does, right? And so they probably view you through the lens of like, okay, this is gonna happen. Dad will make a joke about it. You know, in my house, it's probably the opposite. Like, man, I hope dad doesn't get pissed about this.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So it's a bit the opposite. But like, do you find that your family, do they really, really embrace this like all the time? Or is it more like, Dad, this is not the time to joke?
Um, so with the ages of my kids, like obviously my 1 year old, she has no sense of humor. It's terrible. I'm kidding. She's one.
Right, right.
She
What
should.
is wrong with her?
But like the 6 year old is just getting into a world of like he's developing his own personality and a little sense of humor, and the 4 year old is getting there too, and he can have some sly comments. If I know I don't want to sound hypocritical, but I don't do a ton of like dad jokes, like eye rolling dad jokes. The most common thing I'll do is like I do a lot of like comedic observations, and I think of like if I was on stage doing a stand up set, what would be the thing I would say right now? And that usually involves me saying, "Hey, honey, we need to go to the other room because I have a joke that I have to tell you right now." And she's like, "Oh, fine." And so she's cool with it, and it's usually and great comedy comes from a place of truth. So it's something I've observed in how they're eating or what they're doing or interaction with family, where it's like, okay, I did this thing and it made me think of that, and I just got to get that out. And she'll be like, "That's pretty good, Cory. That's a 7 out of 10." I'm like, "All right, I'll write it down and maybe I'll go up on stage and do it sometime." But
It's
I've
good.
I've spared my kids so far from it because I'm not going to waste my good material till they have that capacity to really appreciate good humor.
I am not going to waste my good material on you.
I
You're a
got
terrible audience at this age.
A level stuff. I'm not going to give it to the 3 o'clock crowd that doesn't
Oh
understand
my
what's going
God.
on. Come
That's
on.
great. How often do you perform like just in front of crowds?
So at this, like, I really took a step back when I had our first kid, and so maybe once a month or every 2 months is when I'll get up on stage locally in Tucson, either there's an improvised stand up show. So you basically get on stage and people text in words and you have to come up with jokes based on the word, which
That's
is,
wild.
dude, I spent years memorizing stuff in pharmacy school. I'm so tired of memorizing. I love it. I loved the challenge of like coming up with a joke on the fly like that. So I'll do that. I'll do an occasional improv show, and then I'll get out and I'll do like a keynote or a workshop with an organization basically as demand allows. So when the more people want me to go out and do stuff, the more I go out and travel and get to work with awesome people and help teach them these skills so that they can take it back to their hospitals or their families or their businesses and be more effective human beings.
I love that, man. Um, do you find what do you do when for you the comedic part of you is hard to find? And what I mean by that is when things get a little rough or challenging, right,
Mhm,
in life, and you're just like, or you're just pissed, or you feel defeated,
mhm.
and it's hard to flex like that muscle of lightheartedness. What do you do in that situation?
I think that I'm going to go back to that world of yes and. That yes and is about accepting reality. And so if I'm pissed and I'm upset, I will acknowledge like I'm upset and I'll try to find the reason why. Identify, am I tired? Did I have a long day at work? Is there something stressing me out? Because I don't think it's authentic to just tell yourself jokes, to lie to yourself like, "Hey, I'm going to just joke my way out of this even though I'm deeply depressed and upset." Like that's not reality. So when I find myself in those places, I'll lean on my wife and be like, "Hey," first acknowledge, be like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I've been a grump. I woke up like in a foul mood. I think it was X, Y, or Z. What do you think?" And she's like, "Yeah, you've been a jerk." And I'll be like, "Okay, thanks for reminding me." And that's sort of like a lighthearted moment, like, "Hey, you don't have to rub the salt in the wound. Like, I'm being open and vulnerable here, hun." And she's like, "Yeah, I know. You still piss me off." I'm like, "All right, that's fair." Or when I'm getting upset, like, imagine I was in the same scenario as you and your son, and I'm yelling at my 6 year old for playing quietly, and my wife's like, "He's not doing anything wrong. What's your problem?" I'd be like, "I'm being unreasonable," like acknowledging like it's just this angry acknowledgement that I need to be angry right now. And then from there, usually my outlet's like exercise. Or the other day,
Mhm.
I literally went to Costco by myself on a Thursday afternoon on like a low volume day and walked around and it's had samples and did our shopping and just getting like understanding that that was what I needed to get away. And I came home in such a good mood. I was like, honey, I just went to Costco and it was great. She's like, good, stop being pissed. So it doesn't always mean I turn to a joke. It means that I just acknowledge where I'm at and know the tools I use to get out of those ruts.
Isn't it kind of funny just that in and of itself? Like you saying, like, I went to Costco by myself on a low volume day. Like if you were to rewind the tape when you were like in college and, having a good time and partying, and you'd be with your buddies and your buddies would see that you were having a really hard time, and suddenly you come back a breath of fresh air. People would be like, "What'd you do?" You'd be like, "Oh, like I went partying, or I did
Yeah.
this, or I went for a run." And like if you were to say to your college buddies, "I went to Costco and it was a low volume day and I just got to walk around."
Yeah.
Like, it's just the story and the therapeutic things that bring us peace of mind just changed so much over the years, man.
Yeah, and I think that I mean that itself is funny. It's that
Yeah.
acknowledging of that absurd reality of the things that change as a parent when
Yeah.
that kind of fill your tank back up. And
Yeah.
for us, if we get like an hour before we pick the kids up from school to just talk, like this, it's like a weekend off. It all becomes relative.
I agree. I agree, man. My wife and I, we used to like when we were in college because we met in college, right? We used
Hmm.
to like fight, to cause you didn't even start to get ready to go out until like 10:30 at night,
Hmm.
like, and then you're up until like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And the if we're in bed by 9:30, we're both looking at each other like we just won like the freaking sweepstakes. Like we're
Yeah,
just like, oh my God, like we're actually getting some sleep tonight. And we're so
yeah,
happy. It's almost like someone gave us a gift.
yeah,
And so yeah, your perspectives definitely change.
yeah,
So
yeah. And rather
um
than fight it, embrace that.
yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I will get to bed at night, and our joke is like we say good morning because by the time we're up in the morning and the kids are up, like it's nonstop all day.
Oh yeah. Especially with the season that you're in,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
6 to 1 years old, right?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah, it's
fire hose of
busy.
life. Yeah,
It's busy.
it's
Yeah.
so validating to hear that from someone with older kids. Like every time I tell that to someone whose kids are older, they're like, "It will still be hard, but it will be a different hard, and you will be able to breathe." I'm like, "That is
Yeah.
all I need to hear." I feel like I'm glad to know I'm not doing something wrong. It's just
Yeah.
the reality of where we're at.
I just and plus, like, I think being able to look through the lens of like, because people have asked me too, like, they're like, God, they're like 4 boys. Like, dude, how do you do it? And I do make a joke, and I've made this joke forever, but it's if I don't actually look at my family through this lens, like a lot of things that are going on would annoy me. And now,
Mhm.
because you look at it through a different lens, it's funny. And then I just tell people, I'm like, just imagine a fraternity house where everybody's drunk and nobody wants to sleep and you never get to leave. That's my house. Like, literally say things out loud
Mhm.
to these other human beings that when I say them out loud, I'm like, I can't believe I just I just said that, like, I can't
Mhm.
believe I'm just like, is there any way how did you pee? How did you get pee in the shower when the toilet's right here? And
They
I'm
just
sitting here
wanted
thinking,
they wanted to do it.
I know, I'm
It was
just like,
cool.
it's like all over the curtain. Like I had my 10-year-old last night. It was really funny. And I just kind of looked at him and smiled. And he comes up to me. He's like, hey, Dad. He's like, Ethan, who's my oldest, wants to know if I can watch a scary movie with him tonight. I was like, oh, really? Ethan wants to know that? You don't want to know that? And he's just like, he's like, well, I was really wanting to know. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
just like points for creativity.
yeah.
But let me ask you this: what is y- you see we see it all the time, right? And by the way, truth be told, um, I fall into this trap more than I'd like to even admit. But like when there's a lot of things going on and you just tend to get like rattled and you're just like, oh my God, can I just like have you do what you're told? Or can we just like get through the line of Costco without you like doing something freaking crazy? Like, you know what I mean? Like where you're just
Mhm.
like, and there's a part of me that it's kind of like the quote that Ryan Reynolds movie of Van Wilder, don't take the life too seriously. You'll never get out alive. And when
Mhm.
I see other people get like really bent out of shape about really minor stuff, and I really, really put a spotlight on the really minor stuff, because if you have a kid that's like going absolute berserk,
Mhm.
in a public place, and the parents aren't doing anything about it. Like, I'm just like, you need to do something about that.
Yeah.
But like the parents who are just like super annoyed and just like, they're just not finding that joy or that sense of humor. Like, what advice would you give parents to help them maybe flex that joy or that sense of humor muscle a little bit more?
I would ask them, has getting pissed off changed any of that behavior? Has that ever worked? Because no,
No.
it really hasn't for me. So rather than fight it, how can you channel? And then the follow up question is, how can you channel it? Like
Yeah.
the Costco checkout line's a great example. When I take my boys with me to Costco, we turn a game into like building a fort in the cart. Like I could try to get them to like stay on the side of the cart. I can get them to try to do that. Like you're gonna sit in the cart and you guys are gonna build a fort out of frozen blueberries. And I throw the items to the kids and they catch it and they're working on their I like it because they're working on their hand-eye coordination skills, things that I sorely lacked as a kid and didn't play as well at sports. So train them up. It's training. It's like letting them be creative. And the cool thing is, like, for all the looks that you might get from parents who are disapproving of your like kid that's misbehaving, the number of smiles I get from other people watching me play with my kids instead of having their like, because the other sad thing is when I see the heads in the tablets at Costco and everywhere, like the great episode you did with like Death by a Thousand Glances, like the kids are now like zonked out of this thing. We turn it into a game and it keeps them distracted, it keeps them engaged. And now like I've made it through Costco a lot with the two boys, like without a lot of problems and being willing to say yes. Like if they want, like short of like getting like 10 pounds of Hershey's fudge chocolate bars or whatever, like, can we try that? Like, yeah, sure. Like let's not fight this thing. Not that you're going to give into your kids every indulgence, but try and start turn stuff into a game.
Hmm.
Yeah, I find that that makes it much more effective and you're less more of like an authoritative figure.
It's crazy, man. Like trying to get your kids, and I wish I would have known this when I had my first two, but like on nights that we even have the kids like just fight us on getting ready for bed, we're
Mhm.
like, we just turn it into be like, hey, which one of you can get ready faster?
Yep.
And it is amazing the amount of words that you do not have to say,
Mhm.
right? The voice that doesn't need to be raised, and suddenly they are just like happy as a clam and as fast as they can trying to get their pajamas on and brush their teeth, which is, you just gamify it a little bit.
Yeah, we literally used that last night. My wife was like, "All right, who can get ready in 5 minutes?" And they were all ready for bed, and they all fell asleep fast because they were running around all day long.
So
And
they're
it,
not terrified of your wife who knows jujitsu?
no, they're the two boys are total mama's boys. So she hasn't instilled fear in them yet of her crazy ability to choke people out. And like I mean, they wrestle each other, they wrestle us. We make it like that's one of the joys of being a dad is when they were old enough to wrestle each other. And my poor daughter, when she came home, like she's 2 days old. The middle kid's like, is she old enough to wrestle yet? Like, no, she has to get older. The next day, she's older. Can we wrestle? Like, no. So she hasn't instilled that sort of fear into them yet. I know better, but they'll find out soon enough.
How long has your wife been doing jujitsu?
So she did it. She did it for like 3 or 4 years, and then in 2018 she stopped as we started having kids. And I think we're done at three, so we're not brave enough to get to the four square level of kids. So she'll be getting back to it as soon as she can. I think as soon as she can. I think at this point, she's joked that her body's been the kids for 6 years, and
Yeah.
now she's getting her own body back. So she's a blue belt. I like to brag on my wife because she could beat me up. I have not done martial arts, so but she's excited to get back to that. And when she starts doing it, the boys will see her doing it, and our daughter will see her doing it, and then they'll want to do it. And I'm excited for that season to come back because I know that really fills her tank up.
That's awesome, man. Sweep the leg. Like
Yeah.
get a body bag, right? Like I love
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
That's so cool.
we have a big old punching bag because our oldest like
Yeah.
punching stuff. We went to the Play It Against Sports and we're like, we're looking for a punching bag. And the guy's like, he's a little young for that. He goes up, starts punching stuff. He's like, you know what? Why don't you get the
Never
big one?
mind. Yeah,
Yeah, he's good.
yeah. He's
So
all right. So that's cool. Very cool stuff, man. So, guys, we are talking to Cory Jenks, and he is the best-selling author of I Guess I'm a Dad Now, a humorous handbook for newish dads who don't want to be stuck. You also have a book that you wrote called Permission to Care, Building a Healthcare Culture That Thrives in Chaos. Like, you're the guy, man. Like, just looking at your stuff here, you're the guy that, give Cory a chaotic environment and he will find a way to somehow, some way become more emotionally acute and a better listener and more empathetic and find the pearls, in any
Yeah.
situation. I'm thinking that's super cool, man.
Well, that's always the goal, and those are very, very kind words coming from you.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Awesome, brother. Well, as
Great.
we head out of here today, I want to give you the opportunity to just share, what is one thing that if you could completely change the mind and the heart of fathers out there and just help them with this journey that we call fatherhood, we call marriage, what advice would you want to give us today?
Well, I'm going to use a comedy lesson.
Okay. Perfect.
Everyone bombs. We
All
all
right.
bomb at stuff, but you got to get back on stage, learn from your bombing, and use that as a gift to make your jokes better and to use that as a metaphor. You're gonna like I talk about it, all the things in my book that I fall short on and in my marriage. And if you aren't willing to be humble enough to admit those mistakes, it's going to be a long road. But I've been on enough stages and told enough bad jokes and had enough bad improv scenes to learn from. And so understand that bombing's part of the deal of being a dad, being a husband, being a comedian. But if you're able to get back up on it, listen to the right people to give you the feedback. You too can be a pharmacist comedian someday.
And I'm curious, have you bombed?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
so, like, have you ever gotten up to the point where you're just looking at everybody and be like, and that's my time.
Uh,
And
we do that like on an improv stage. We'll be like doing a scene, and usually it goes a long time, and there's no laughs, and we kind of all look at each other, and we do this thing called a sweep. So you just like run across the stage to end the scene and start a new one. And we all will kind of like look at each other and just be like, and then run across the stage, sweep it, and just start a new one. Just say we'll pretend that didn't even happen.
oh
So
my God, that's great. And
uh,
I'm guessing the audience probably they kind of like that. Like they
yeah, they're like
probably
this.
because they don't expect that, right?
Well, and they appreciate the fact that that terrible scene is over and we can all move on from our miserable lives.
Oh
And
my God.
I mean, they're not mean about it. Like they're just, it's not funny. So they're not laughing. And
Right.
I mean, if we're going to learn any lessons here is learning to save the high stakes stuff for the high stakes. Like not getting a
Yeah.
laugh is not the end of the world. And it
Yeah.
really has helped develop a muscle for me of taking risks and understanding that stuff will happen. You won't get your way. And you can just, most people are going to forget about it anyway.
Oh my God, that's great, man. That's great. Guys, go follow Cory. Cory, I know what is the best way to find you. I know CoryJenks.com is
Yeah.
your website,
Yeah.
which is CoryJenks
Mhm.
.com. But where else can men find you and just connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You could find me on Instagram and X at Pharmacomedian. So those are great places to come and see some of the funny stuff I post periodically. Although I've been inspired by many of your episodes to limit that sort of posting. So I want to make sure whatever I'm putting out there is going to be valuable. But come say hi, send me a message. And for my website, you can find all of that in my books. And if you hear me on here, you want to connect and send me a message and say, Cory, you are an idiot about fasting. Any engagement's good engagement. That's what I say.
You can't go 20 hours without
21.
food.
I say 21. I'm raising the
21.
stakes here. Yeah.
Gents, you won't have to look very far at all. This has been awesome, by the way. Cory,
Yeah.
I've really, really enjoyed this. You can head on over to thedadedge.com/166 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 166 for this show. This was awesome. Cory, I really, really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for coming on, man.
This was a treat. Thank you.
You bet.